Empowered people make informed decisions that lead to living a life without regret. This is Sarah Kaki and Shauna Woods from Atlanta Divorce Law Group, and this is the Happily Ever After Divorce Podcast. Welcome to the Happily Ever After Divorce Podcast. This is Sarah Kaki with Atlanta Divorce Law Group, and I'm joined by our very own managing partner, Shauna Woods. Shauna, today's topic is what happens if one of you in a marriage wants a divorce and the other one does not. Let's break this down. There's two ways this could happen.
Yeah.
First scenario, we get a call from a client or a potential client telling us that they are being served with divorce papers, or possibly their spouse has hired an attorney and they're about to go through the divorce process, but they don't want to be divorced. They actually don't want to go through this process. They want to stay married. What options do they have? Let's break it down legally before we go through the more emotional decision-making part of this.
Absolutely. And when we talk about options, what I really want to kind of point out is they're asking a question, but what they want is a little bit more than the answer to the question they're asking.
Absolutely.
Because the simplest answer to what happens if one person wants a divorce and the other person doesn't, in the state of Georgia and in most states, it doesn't matter so long as one person wants it, the divorce is going to happen. That's legally the correct answer to give somebody. But that's probably not what they're asking.
You're absolutely right. And to the legal response, usually the question of, can he divorce me if I don't want to, or can I still get a divorce if he doesn't want to get divorced? I see it a lot in our international clients.
Yes.
Because so many other countries, the laws are very different. May have to get some sort of a tribunal approval or get a clergyman or somebody's approval before you can go forward with a divorce. But if, like you said, in Georgia, one party wants the divorce, it can be enough to go through the whole divorce process.
Well, it is enough to go through the divorce process because this state, and like I said, most other states, have what's called irretrievably broken as a count of divorce. In Georgia, there's actually 13 counts. There's 12 fault grounds. And it used to be that you would have to prove something was at fault. They were committed adultery or habitual alcoholism, or I'm trying to think of another one, habitual drugs, things like that. You would have to prove that somebody was at fault before you could get a divorce. But that changed in the 70s for most of the states. Irretrievably broken is simply that one person believes it is irretrievably broken and wants out of the marriage. Now, other states do have waiting periods. Some other states.
I know Connecticut does.
Yeah, I think Tennessee does too, and in one of the Carolinas. They can have up to a year waiting period before they allow you to have a divorce from what they call as the date of separation. And without going way down a legal, rabbit hole here. So that being said, so that's kind of the background of, can we get a divorce if one person does not want to? The short answer is yes, you can. The long answer is, why is it you're asking me this, and what is the purpose?
So you kind of nailed it when you said earlier that they're asking a bigger question. What do you believe is the bigger question going through our client's mind when they're asking, can this person divorce me if I don't want a divorce? What do you think emotionally or from a decision-making perspective they're really asking you?
So if it is the person who does not want the divorce, that's the scenario you've set up for me. Okay. One question may be, what is it you're scared of going through this divorce? What is your biggest fear? Is it losing the relationship? Mm-hmm. Did you really believe this relationship was happy? Is it a financial thing? Is it a custody thing? What is it you're afraid of going through the divorce? So we have to find out what that fear is so that we can address that particular issue. Sometimes people really do say to me, I want to work on this marriage. And I say, okay, there are some things that I can do legally to help you slow roll a divorce process.
Yes, slow it down.
Slow it down. There are some things that I can do to assist you in that. And of course, the first thing we do is say, now you need to be in personal therapy. And now you need to see if they'll do some marriage counseling
Right.
with you. And if not marriage counseling and you have children, let's see if they'll go to some co-parenting counseling with you at the onset of this or even before it.
So, what I believe, to go back to your point, the underlying question is, do I have any control in this?
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Right? Because it's a complete attack on your sense of control of what is happening around you. It is a feeling of something is happening to me versus I am participating in a transition in my life. And the idea of slowing it down is not meant to take a Band-Aid slowly off of you. It's meant to slow down something that could possibly be an emotional decision on the other side, that if we were to just cool off for a second, maybe there's chance and there's hope for reconciliation. I mean, I can just say in our years in the firm, there's been many people that filed for divorce and still were able to reconcile and get together and withdrew their filing. So I always tell clients that come to me and say this, that, oh my God, he or she filed, I don't want this, what do I do? The first thing I say is, just because they filed doesn't mean you're divorced, right? And I'm not in the business of giving people false hope, but I do believe that hope is important if you think there's something yet there worth fighting for. If you believe that this thing is based on a emotional decision making and you can come in and try to hopefully level off some momentous decision making that goes too fast, right? Like you said, we had one client, actually, a male client, who came to us, and I don't know if you remember this one. I don't think you were on this case, but we actually contacted the opposing counsel and said, hey, this man still loves his wife very much. Mm-hmm. Are you willing to just stay put for a second and let's give them a chance to go to some therapy? And then if she still wants the divorce, he'll do everything to make this amicable for her, to make this not drag it out and give her the divorce she wants. But can we at least do it in a way that they both feel like they've honored the marriage as much as they possibly can? And of course, in that scenario, we were lucky and they were able to do that. But it's not always the case. But I think it at least gave our client a sense of, man, I did whatever I could. I did whatever I could to not just, roll over while this was handed to me.
I don't know if I was on that particular case or not, but I've had several cases that way where you can reach out to opposing counsel and say they're not wanting, this divorce. And even in certain filings, instead of filing a counterclaim, you simply file an answer. That does give them a sense of ownership.
Right.
Right? Like what you were saying, to say, I don't want this. You're pursuing this. I'm telling you right now, I don't believe it's irretrievably broken. I still think there's a hope of reconciliation. And I do think that it's worth reaching out to the opposing counsel to do that. I know some attorneys won't. The type of law we practice, I think we have to walk very carefully between strictly legal, which is not what we do,
right,
and taking the term counselor, legal counselor,
right,
very serious. Absolutely. Those are people's lives that we hold in our hands, and giving them the opportunity to either have that closure time or reconcile is extremely important.
I am sure for everybody out there that had a fast divorce happen that they didn't even know, I've heard this a lot, it all happened so fast. Yeah. I don't even know what happened. I also pray that there's just as many people out there that met with an attorney that for a second just calmed them down, got them to become cool and collected in their decision making and really think it through. Now, one thing's fascinating on this scenario we're talking about, which is the one who comes to us saying, I don't want the divorce.
Yeah.
Statistically speaking, in our office, this is mostly men.
Yes.
Isn't that fascinating? That we're mainly seeing the men come to us and say, I don't want the divorce, but she's rolling with it. What do I do?
Oh, sorry, you're going to go way deep into like sociology.
I am.
Okay.
Have you met me?
Yeah. So here's one of the things that I do think is happening, and I think it's happening in society as a whole. And you find this because when you look at simple divorce filings, it is more women,
right,
who initiate the divorce process than men. What research seems to be showing is that women after divorces are happier than men after divorces, and also that women don't rush back into relationships.
They don't. Men statistically within 18 months are re-engaged.
So we have to look at, okay, what is that? So one of the reasons I believe that it's happening is because there is an imbalance in the emotional work that is done in a relationship, and most of that emotional work is put on the woman to fulfill the needs of her husband, but she's not having her emotional needs met. He may be providing for her financially, he may be providing for her in other ways, but not the emotional work. So when I have a man who comes to me and he says, I don't want this divorce, part of that, of telling him, well, why don't you see if we can, what we've got to do to reconcile, is now he's at this desperation point where he wants to put it in the emotional work. On the flip side,
right,
we have the woman who's been putting on the emotional work 10, 15, 30 years, and when she's done, she's done.
I also think here's the problem with that. The men think they've put in the emotional work. They do. It's just different. I think it's different how men put in emotional work versus how women do. I think women, we carry everything around it. We carry all the labor. We carry the talking. We carry the communicating. We carry, let me find out from other people what they did, and all the information gathering. I mean, we were, from an evolutionary sociological standpoint, we were gatherers,
yes,
right? So we gather all the little information. We observe him from afar and make a strategy on how can I do this better, and it's carrying with us. The men's emotional work, again, goes back to the sociological, where do we come from, the hunting and the gathering. They labor the full responsibility. One thing, they're single mind focused, right? So their one focus is, this whole family rests on my shoulders. The full responsibility of this family's well-being, safety, and financials. And so providing for them relies on my shoulders. Even if the wife is the higher earner, he still, from an instinct masculine perspective, has the emotional labor of, this whole thing is on my shoulders. So my theory is that for everything you just said, the women exhaust themselves out.
Yes.
They burn themselves out. And they don't even know when it happened. But when it happened and they don't see any results of it, they're done. Try to talk a woman out of it. It's almost impossible. When they're done, and we've said this before. Whereas a man, because his emotional labor is one thing and one thing only, is I take full responsibility for everything in this home, he may never be done. Because that responsibility is almost like a spiritual one for him. It's an instinctual one for him. He can't get rid of it. So you'll see a man, even after divorce, still somehow take responsibility for the ex-wife.
Oh, you just said something, and people in the podcast world cannot see me roll my eyes as hard as I just rolled my eyes, because I cannot tell you how many times I have sat with my male clients and told them, do not give away the farm, because that's how they feel. I still feel responsible for her. And I hear this all the time.
Yes.
Even in modifications. I've got a case going right now where my client is way overpaying in child support, and the other person is basically trying to guilt this person into continuing to pay it. And so I agree with you completely. And of course, what we're talking about is averages, and most people, everybody's unique. And look, I've got some male clients who they did the emotional work, right? But in general, from the background and where we come from, just like what you said, hunters and gatherers, that these are kind of the way we were built.
I just had a client last week that I spoke to, that wonderful man, did not want to go through this divorce process at all. And when you want to know what are my options, what can I do, and basically gave him the short legal answer, which you can't do much about stopping a divorce that's coming, but what can you do to stay within integrity with yourself so that you can feel there was a sense of control brought into this. You're not just reacting to divorce papers, but you are proactive about, how do I want to feel with my opinion about myself if this does go through. And at the end of the day, as you feel that you're out of control in a scenario like this, the only thing you can control has always been you. And you just need to remind yourself of that.
Okay.
Okay, Shauna, let's go through the other scenario. We get the client or potential client that comes to us saying, I want a divorce, but the other person doesn't.
Okay.
So what's your quick, short legal answer here?
Again, same legal answer that I gave previously. If one person wants out of a marriage, that marriage is going to be concluded here in the state of Georgia. So that's the short legal answer. Yes, we can do that.
Do you think strategically, from a legal strategy perspective, when we have somebody who's seeking divorce when the other party does not want it, it possibly can cause some barriers?
Absolutely, it could cause some barriers. Well, let's just talk about the one that I mentioned earlier when I said I personally know how to slow roll a divorce. Right? I'm not the only one out there who knows how to do that. So if you have somebody on the other side, you may run into a little bit of obstacles that are being set up legally by the other side because of their client not wanting a divorce. And it's not unethical. Right? And I want to be very clear on that. Because what we're doing is providing whatever client we represent the space to do what they need to do to get where we're going. Right. So there's no, oh gosh, that attorney's being horrible. It's like, no, they're going to set up some legal obstacles. They're advocating. So one of the things I tell them is like, that may happen, right? We may get some slow rolling on the other side. There are things that I also can do to push the case forward a little faster. The other thing I tell them is this is going to be hard with negotiations.
Right.
Not because of that they negotiated the details of the case may be that difficult, but when we're having somebody who's on the other side who does not want a divorce, you can put the sweetest, most wonderful offer in front of them and they're going to say no. Not even intentionally of, no, I'm saying no because I don't want the divorce, but inside what's going on with their emotions and their ability to make these decisions, they're just not there yet. And so sometimes when I say to the other person, they're like, well, I want this over quickly, and they don't want the divorce. We have to walk through the scenarios of, again, are you going to give away the farm just to get out of this marriage? Is that what you want to do? Let's really realistically look at it. Or sitting there going, it's okay to let them slow roll because that's going to get the other person to a place where negotiations can actually happen, right? So it's very fact specific, but the strategy that I go into really is, I need to know all about, your spouse and how they're thinking and what's going on. I also need to know your goals and where we need to go with that. Are there financial considerations we need to take into place? So our strategy sessions are so very case specific, but there are many things that we can do. So that's one of the first things that we ask. What are your goals?
And that's why sometimes these types of cases can look so transactional.
Yeah.
It's very common. I think I met with a lady this morning, actually. No minor children involved, just assets and possibly a conversation of alimony. Transactional. No crazy hidden accounts anywhere. But the fact of the matter is, he's not going to want the divorce. And she wants the divorce. That fact alone makes this a non-transactional divorce case. It makes it more of an emotional, when can we both get there? Right? And again, statistically speaking, most of the clients who come to us who want the divorce and tell us that the other side is going to dig their head in the sand and not make this that quick and easy, it's usually the women. Yes. Because when the women are done, they're done. Also, it does happen that a man that also wants a divorce, but still, to your point earlier of emotional laboring, it is the woman that gets the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And statistically speaking, like you said, more women are filing than men. I think it goes back to when women are done, they're ready for that next chapter in their lives. Where men, as much as I think stereotype them to say they're not monogamous, they're not this, I think they like the idea of this is my family, this is my team that I'm responsible for. So it is emotionally hard for them to say, okay, I know we agreed on divorce, but let's just go ahead and do it, right?
Absolutely. And think back, of course, how most, especially, I'm Gen X, you're a millennial, elder millennial.
Be kind.
I'm not going to be ugly, but what I'm saying is for our generations, we were still pretty much raised with certain things. Emotions were a female trait.
Yes.
Men don't cry right?
Right.
You suck it up. The only emotion that men are really allowed to express is anger, right? So going through a divorce case, where are they going with all this grief, right? Which is so hard to process. So women are emotionally better equipped to go through a divorce case.
And I think our society does so much of celebrating it. This is a new trend of celebrating independent women, celebrating women expressing themselves, celebrating women not playing it smart. We're not, in this current new world we're in, we're not seeing as much of that support for men to do the same.
Absolutely. And I do find, and there are a lot of times we'll have very deep conversations with my male clients that have nothing to do with the law, but just they're expressing emotions that maybe they weren't ever allowed to express in their relationship or in their past life. And I think it's a safe space for them because legally I'm not allowed to tell anybody.
And if the woman who is leaving or the man who's leaving somebody that does not want to end the marriage, I would highly recommend working with an attorney that is going to be respectful towards the other side's feelings. And unless obviously we have a situation where we're divorcing somebody abusive,
right,
or an abusive situation, or just somebody that does not want to be fair and is going to use any opportunity to one up the other person. But if we have truly a situation where one person is saying, don't leave me, and you're leaving that person, I would really recommend hiring somebody that says, you know what, why don't you let me, as respectfully as possible, just take care of finishing this up for you. Sometimes it's better in those situations for you to go home and not constantly talk about the divorce with that person and just start focusing on, okay, what's next? What are the things we should be taking care of together, such as the children or selling the house or whatnot, instead of going home and constantly shoving down, are you going to sign these yet? Are you going to sign these yet? Have you responded to my attorney yet? Don't do that.
Not only that, honestly, if you allow us, and I always put this in quotations, allow me to be, quote, the bad guy, at the end of it, I can always be the bad guy in your ex-spouse's mind.
Right.
And that doesn't do anything to me. Right. It doesn't affect my world at all. If you're the bad guy, it can affect your co-parenting relationship. Right. So relying on your attorney and relying on their professionalism to be able to help navigate both a legal and emotional transaction, right? It's very difficult. It's a nice balance that the right attorneys are going to be able to provide for you.
I think at the end of the day, if you are somebody who is seeking a divorce from somebody that does not want to divorce yet, you're probably have a high sense of urgency of getting it done fast. And the words we hear from you often is, I just want it to be over with. And that is going to be a cost-benefit analysis, to Shauna's point of, right, how much are you willing to walk away from to quickly settle? And sometimes you could give up the whole farm and the person still wants to go through the whole process to get this done. So more important than ever to stay clear on what it is, why you want to do this, and what the vision is after this, because this process, again, can be tedious, especially when you're done in your mind and mentally you're just somebody somewhere else. Thanks for listening to the Happily Ever After Divorce Podcast. If you'd like to learn more, go to atlantadivorcelawgroup.com/resources.